when people say that they believe something, when they hold the belief, they might be talking about what they love as much as what they think. And that's a really important distinction, because when you think about if I were to imagine like the typical evangelical participant in a mega church down south somewhere, swaying to music and holding their heart and, raising a hand in praise and with their eyes closed, and you hear them say the word, "I believe in Jesus." Are they making a claim in that moment about who and what Jesus is, or what Jesus means? Or are they saying, "I love the idea of Jesus. I love the meaning of Jesus in my life"? And what I've noticed about the discourse that a lot of our landscape inherits from rationalism, skepticism, new atheism, is that the notion that people are actually talking about what they hold dear is lost. And this is not to say that beliefs can't have negative outcomes, but it is to say that if you don't address the fact that when people say that they believe in something, and what they really mean is that they love the idea of, acupuncture or Reiki. They love the worldview or the feeling that they get when they encounter astrology. Then they're talking about something different than whether or not astrology has predictive power in any kind of like measurable sense. And I think if we miss that, then we're gonna miss culture in a lot of ways, because I think like I don't live by beliefs in the sense of these are the things that I know to be true. I live in a world of trust and endearments, like these are the things that I love. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say about what I believe. And then following from that is like, I can list all of the things that I love, but I don't really use those things or focus upon them as articles of truth, or things that will never change, or things that are just sort of etched in stone.
Well, you're saying you're putting in your own kind of frame something that I'm going to come back to again and again today, which is that the differentiating of meaningful experience and emotional connection, whether that's to that experience or to the group of people with whom one bonds during that experience, that teasing that apart from faith claims and from the metaphysical ideology, whether it's explicit or implicit, in which that is happening, I think is a really worthwhile endeavor. And I think that even though the person in that megachurch may not be saying, when they say, "I love Jesus," that they believe in some very specific set of factual claims, the preacher is saying that. And the preacher is selling them on the idea that if you believe these things, you will go to heaven, you will have eternal life, you will not die, which is a core thing that people are really afraid of. You will be saved by having this personal relationship with Jesus, who is not just a metaphorical mythic symbol, but in that context is the living God. That through him you shall come to salvation. And so I think it's really tricky to...
They might have doctrinal training that way, it's true.
Yeah.
They might be repeating what they've learned in seminary.
Who, the preacher?
Yes, the preacher.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that... I mean, there's this distinction, Derek, you were talking about religious studies and its struggles with defining religion. Well, yeah. And one of the most compelling ideas that I've come across in the last 10 years or so is, I can't remember who's the pioneer of this, but the notion of lived religion is to try to find the distinction between what people enjoy doing in terms of their spiritual meaning and how they identify in terms of doctrinal tenets. Mm-hmm. And there's usually a huge difference between those things when you really do the sociology on them, right? Like the person who practices Catholicism in Mexico with elements of Santeria and whatever is saying that they hold the doctrinal tenets of the Catholic Church, but what they're actually doing in their lives from day to day reflects something much different. And so, yeah, there's a wedge in there, and I think we have to like walk a line, because I'm sure our listeners are filled with this split world of experience versus claims as well, or at least they live there too.
Jesus would look a lot more like AOC than Ted Cruz today,
right?
Which would infuriate conservative Republicans in America. But if you want to actually talk social structure and policy, that's just the reality. So when people say they're waiting for Jesus to come back, no, they're not really, because you wouldn't recognize that. And if you did, you would reject it, which is exactly what we're seeing play out in America. But
when you say look like, you mean in terms of policy, right?
Yes, not physically. Correct. Well, the hair too, I guess. But the romanticization aspect of spirituality, I mean, we're so accustomed to it from the yoga land, where there's this idea of there were these yogis who just meditated to bliss, spent their days and everything. It reminds me of a conversation, and I think I brought this up in one of the music episodes, but when back in my DJing days, I used to DJ with someone named Rekha, who founded Basement Bhangra. And in the early aughts, there was this moment where Indian music was having a moment in hip hop where Jay-Z sampled Punjabi MC, and Missy Elliott and Timberland took a tabla sample for one of her big hits. And so there was a talk, because I was predominantly DJing and hanging out with the South Asian community. And Rekha warned, because when I asked her, I said, how do you feel about Bhangra reaching mainstream acceptance now all of a sudden after all these years? She said it really bothered her, this happy natives story that was around Bhangra from the general population, meaning that this is all music of the happy Indians in the fields dancing as they gathered the crops and planted and all of that. And she's like, that's not the reality of what Indians go through. And, we've, of course, in our circles, we know about the problems with Monsanto in India, very real problems that happen with trademarks, and how high the suicide rate is in farming in India. But it's not like that's a new problem. This is sustenance farming across Asia has been an issue for thousands of years, probably since the dawn of agriculture. So the distance between our idea of what a spirituality is and what the lived reality of the people are is vast. But as I've often said, if you live a middle class or better lifestyle in America, where those concerns aren't really affecting you, then of course you can have your imagination can go anywhere you want to think that there is this ideal time that you'll reach if you just do these things that your yoga instructor has told you to do.